started, make sure to subscribe to the channel and like
Hey
this
you,
video.
subscribe to the channel
That
and
way,
enjoy watching.
you'll always stay connected to our stories and never miss the next adventure. Station Luminara hung in the void like a jewel made of metal and glass, spinning lazy circles around a planet nobody particularly wanted to colonize, but everyone agreed made an excellent neutral meeting point. Thousands of species conducting business, signing treaties, arguing about trade routes, and generally trying not to start another galactic incident. It was the kind of place where you could get authentic Thuvian spice noodles 3 doors down from a Ventaxian meditation pod, where the air smelled like a confused mixture of oxygen, methane, and whatever that sweet stuff the Quellan floaters breathed. Security Chief Kalneth took his job seriously. Very seriously. Possibly too seriously, if you asked anyone who had ever tried to bring so much as an unlicensed plant seed through his checkpoints. His chitinous exoskeleton gleamed under the station lights, mandibles clicking in what other species had learned to recognize as his thinking expression. 4 arms meant 4 data pads, and he consulted all of them simultaneously while his compound eyes tracked every ship coming through the docking bay, which is how he spotted the transport vessel with the concerning manifest. The ship itself looked normal enough, beat-up freight runner class, the kind that had seen better decades. But the cargo listing made his antennae twitch. Domesticated companions, it said. Emotional support animals, it clarified. Completely harmless, it insisted, perhaps a touch too enthusiastically. Kalneth had been doing this job for 19 cycles. Nothing that insisted it was completely harmless ever actually was. The airlock hissed open, and out stepped a human woman who moved with the kind of easy confidence that suggested she had absolutely nothing to hide, which immediately made Kalneth suspicious of everything. She was tall by human standards, with dark hair pulled back in something humans called a braid, wearing clothes that looked practical and well-worn. Her boots had seen some action. Her jacket had pockets. Too many pockets. "Welcome to Station Luminara," Kalneth said, his translator rendering his clicks and whistles into smooth galactic common. "I am Security Chief Kalneth. Your manifest indicates you are transporting live animals?" "That's right," the woman said, extending a hand in that odd human greeting gesture. "Name's Zoya, Wildlife Rehabilitation Specialist from Earth's Colony Network. These are my rescues." Kalneth did not take the hand, mostly because handshakes still confused him even after all these cycles of human contact. Instead, he pulled up her documentation on 2 of his data pads, while the other 2 cycled through station regulations. Station Luminara has very strict protocols regarding predatory species. There was an incident 18 cycles ago involving a Thuvian razor beast that, quite frankly, traumatized an entire delegation and resulted in a small diplomatic war. "I heard about that," Zoya said, not looking particularly concerned. "Wasn't that the one where someone tried to smuggle it in as a decorative sculpture and it woke up hungry? 3 ambassadors required medical intervention. 2 of them still refused to attend stations with animal populations." Kalneth's mandibles clicked sharply. "So you understand why I must be thorough." "Absolutely," Zoya agreed. "Thorough is good. I love thorough." A smaller human emerged from the ship, maybe 12 cycles old by human standards, with the same dark hair and the same unsettling calm. He was carrying what appeared to be a bag of some kind of food, judging by the way it crinkled. "This is Brant," Zoya said. "My son. Say hello to Security Chief Kalneth, sweetie." "Hello, Security Chief Kalneth," Brant said politely, then added, "Your exoskeleton is really cool. Is it like armor?" Despite himself, Kalneth's antennae perked up slightly. "It provides protection, yes, and structural support." He refocused on the matter at hand. "Your cargo containers I will need to inspect them within 6 hours, per station regulations. Sure thing, Zoya said. They're still acclimating to the station's gravity and air pressure anyway. Wouldn't want to stress them out. Them? Kalneth's grip on his data pads tightened. How many animals are we discussing? Just 4, Zoya said brightly. Very well trained. Excellent temperaments. They've been with us for years. From inside the ship came a sound. Low, rumbling, definitely biological. It resonated through the deck plating in a way that made Kalneth's instincts scream predator. What? Kalneth said slowly. Species are these animals? Earth fauna, Zoya said, which was not an answer. Listen, we're only here for a few weeks while I consult with the Xenobiology Division about cross-species rehabilitation techniques. The animals won't leave my quarters. You'll barely know they're here. Another sound from the ship. A huff. Something heavy moving. Kalneth's mandibles clicked in what humans had learned to recognize as deep anxiety. I am going to need more specific information. Of course, Zoya said. How about this? We get settled in our quarters, let everyone decompress from the flight, and you can come by for a full inspection in, say, 5 hours. I'll have all the documentation ready, vaccination records, behavioral assessments, the whole thing. It was reasonable. It followed protocol. Kalneth hated how reasonable it sounded, because his instincts were still screaming. 5 hours, he agreed. Not a minute longer. And if I find any violations of station safety codes— You won't, Zoya said with a smile that would have been reassuring if Kalneth hadn't spent nearly 2 decades learning that human smiles meant absolutely nothing in terms of actual threat assessment. He watched them guide 4 large, sealed containers through the docking bay on hovercarts, each one marked with biohazard symbols and climate control indicators. The containers were big, very big. Big, enough for something significantly larger than the small companion creatures most species kept. As they disappeared down the corridor toward the residential sections, Kalneth pulled up every file he could find on Earth animals. The list was, to put it mildly, concerning. Humans came from a death world. Everyone knew that. But sometimes, in the day-to-day business of running a space station, it was easy to forget just how much of a death world Earth actually was. He was still scrolling through images of things called lions and sharks, and something absolutely horrifying called a hippopotamus when Lumen drifted over. Lumen ran the station's hospitality sector, and their bioluminescent form pulsed with curious colors. I heard we have new arrivals, Lumen said, their voice like wind chimes. Humans with animals? Allegedly domesticated animals, Kalneth muttered. How wonderful. I have always wanted to meet Earth fauna. Their planet has such biodiversity. Did you know they have over 8 million species? 8 million! On one planet! Did you know, Kalneth countered, that approximately 30% of those species could kill you in under a minute? Lumen's form rippled with what might have been a laugh. You worry too much, old friend. Humans bond with other species in ways we still don't fully understand. It's quite beautiful, actually. They form emotional connections with creatures that, by all logic, should be either prey or predator. That's what concerns me, Kalneth said. But Lumen had already drifted off, glowing with excitement, probably already planning some kind of welcome event, because that's what Lumen did. They saw the best in everyone, even humans hauling mysterious containers full of creatures that made ominous sounds. Kalneth returned to his office and spent the next few hours doing what he did best, preparing. He pulled every regulation, every emergency protocol, every incident report involving animals on space stations. He assembled a security team. He requisitioned stun equipment. He made sure medical was on standby. He did not, however, look up what a tiger was. That particular oversight would prove significant in approximately 3 hours and 22 minutes. In their assigned quarters, which were spacious by station standards, Zoya and Brant set up the containers in the large common area. The quarters had been designed for multi-species use, which meant high ceilings, reinforced walls, and environmental controls that could handle everything from Arctic cold to desert heat. "Think he suspects?" Brant asked, opening a bag of what looked like raw meat. "Oh, he definitely suspects," Zoya said, checking the seals on each container. "But suspecting and knowing are two different things. Besides, we're not breaking any rules, technically." "How technical are we talking?" "Very technical. The kind of technical that requires him to actually read the full definition of domesticated companion animal in station law, which, if I'm reading this right, includes any creature that has been socialized to human contact and responds to commands." Brant grinned. "Duchess responds to commands." "Duchess is an angel," Zoya agreed, pressing her hand against the first container. Inside, something large pressed back, and she could feel the warmth through the metal. "They all are. Aren't you babies?" A low chuff answered her. "We should let them out soon," Brant said. "Colonel hates being cooped up." "After the inspection," Zoya said firmly. "I want everything by the book. Well, by the book as I'm interpreting the book. Which is generous, but technically still the book." She moved to her personal data pad and pulled up the files she'd need for Kalneth. Every vaccination, every behavioral assessment, every piece of documentation proving that her animals were exactly what she claimed: well-trained, well cared for, and absolutely no threat to anyone who didn't deserve to be threatened. The fact that they were also apex predators from a death world was just a minor detail. Really, when you thought about it, it wasn't her fault that the galaxy's definition of dangerous and Earth's definition of dangerous were on completely different scales. Humans had spent thousands of years living alongside predators, learning their languages, earning their trust, turning evolution's most efficient killers into friends. The rest of the galaxy just hadn't caught up yet. Outside the quarters, station life continued its usual rhythm. Ships docked and departed. Delegations argued. Merchants haggled. Lumen prepared what they promised would be a low-key welcome gathering, which, knowing Lumen, meant at least 50 guests and food from 8 different species. And in his office, Kalneth reviewed his security protocols one more time, mandibles clicking nervously, absolutely certain that something was about to go wrong. He was right, of course, just not in the way he expected. Kalneth arrived at the human quarters exactly 5 hours later, accompanied by 6 security personnel, 3 scanners, 2 medical technicians standing by in the corridor, and what he privately considered an appropriate level of concern. Which was to say, he was mildly terrified but trying not to show it. The door opened before he could announce himself. Zoya stood there, looking completely relaxed, holding a data pad and smiling that unsettling human smile. "Right on time," she said. "Come on in. Can I get you anything? We've got water, some kind of fruit juice Brant picked up at the commissary. She glanced at his species profile on her pad. "Do you consume liquids, or is that a rude question?" "I am fine, thank you," Kalneth said stiffly, trying to peer past her into the quarters. "I am here to conduct the mandatory inspection of your animals." "Absolutely. Everything's ready." She stepped aside, gesturing them in with a flourish that seemed entirely too casual for someone about to reveal potentially dangerous creatures. The quarters were larger than standard, which made sense for long-term stays, but even so, the 4 containers dominated the space. They were arranged in a semicircle, each one still sealed, each one absolutely silent in a way that somehow felt more ominous than if they'd been making noise. Brant sat cross-legged on the floor near the containers, still holding that bag of meat, looking like this was the most normal thing in the universe. "So," Zoya said brightly, pulling up files on her datapad, "I've got all the documentation here, Duchess, that's Container 1, she's 8 years old, rescued from an illegal breeding operation when she was 6 months old. Full vaccination record, behavioral assessments every 6 months, never had an aggressive incident outside of controlled training scenarios. What species? Kalneth interrupted. Bengal tiger. The translator took a moment, as if it couldn't quite believe what it had heard and needed to double-check. Then it repeated. Bengal tiger. Kalneth went very, very still. His security team, understanding tone if not content, immediately tensed. That is, Kalneth said slowly, an apex predator. Well, yes, Zoya agreed, but a very sweet apex predator. Watch. And before Kalneth could stop her, before he could cite regulations or call for backup or do anything sensible, Zoya reached over and casually unsealed the first container. The doors slid open with a hydraulic hiss. For a moment, nothing happened. Kalneth's hearts, both of them, hammered against his carapace. Then she emerged. 300 pounds of muscle, fur, and evolution's finest work in the field of things that kill other things efficiently. Orange and black stripes that seemed to shimmer under the station lights. Paws the size of dinner plates, each one hiding claws designed to rip through hide and bone. A face that was simultaneously beautiful and absolutely terrifying, with eyes that gleamed with predatory intelligence. Duchess yawned, revealing teeth that could crush a skull, and made a sound somewhere between a rumble and a purr. There's my girl, Zoya cooed, dropping to one knee and extending her hand. The tiger, this apex predator from a death world, this creature that existed solely to hunt and kill, padded forward and bumped her massive head against Zoya's hand like an oversized house cat seeking attention. Behind Kalneth, one of his security team made a sound like a broken air filtration unit. Another one had dropped their scanner. A third was slowly backing toward the door. She's very affectionate, Zoya said, scratching behind Duchess's ears. The tiger's eyes closed in evident pleasure, and that rumbling purr got louder. Loves belly rubs, absolutely terrible at catching the laser pointer, which is hilarious because her ancestors were ambush predators. Duchess, say hello. The tiger turned her enormous head toward Kalneth and chuffed. Every instinct Kalneth possessed screamed flee. Instead, he stood frozen, data, pads forgotten, mandibles locked in an expression of pure horror. Okay, Brant said cheerfully, standing up. Who wants to meet Colonel? No, Kalneth managed. No, I think we have established. Brant opened the second container. If Duchess was terrifying, Colonel was nightmare fuel. The grizzly bear stood on all fours at first, his massive brown bulk filling the container opening. Then, slowly, deliberately, he rose up on his hind legs. And up, and up. 3 meters of bear, maybe more. His head nearly touched the ceiling. He was so large that Kalneth's brain briefly refused to process what it was seeing, because surely nothing that big could be real, could be alive, could be standing in these quarters right now. Colonel looked down at them all, sniffed the air with his massive snout, and made a sound like a yawn mixed with a roar that vibrated through the floor plating. 2 of Kalneth's security team fled. Just straight up left. Gone. Kalneth couldn't even blame them. Colonel's a rescue too, Zoya said conversationally, as if discussing the weather rather than the walking tank of claws and teeth currently filling her living space. Found him caught in an illegal trap, missing part of his paw. We got him medical treatment, and he just never wanted to leave. Very gentle, despite his size. Brant naps on him sometimes. I do, Brant confirmed. He's warm and he snores. It's cute. Colonel dropped back to all fours, shaking his entire body in a way that made everything in the room rattle slightly, and lumbered over to Brant. The boy, this small human child, reached up and scratched the bear's chin. The bear made a satisfied grumbling sound and plopped down next to him, all 600 pounds hitting the floor with a thud that Kalneth felt through his feet. "This is," Kalneth said faintly, "this is not acceptable." "But wait," Zoya said, and Kalneth's remaining composure cracked, because those were the words, those exact words, that no one ever wanted to hear. "There's more." She opened containers 3 and 4 simultaneously. The wolves emerged like liquid shadows, moving in perfect synchronization. They were smaller than Duchess and Colonel, but somehow that made them worse, because they moved with pack intelligence, with coordination, with the kind of predatory assessment that said they were thinking, planning, evaluating every creature in the room for weaknesses. Bonnie and Clyde, Zoya had called them. They circled the room once, twice, pale eyes tracking movement, and then, in a display that should have been impossible, they sat down in perfect formation in front of Zoya and waited. "Good babies," Zoya said, reaching into Brant's bag and pulling out chunks of raw meat. She tossed one to each wolf. They caught them mid-air with casual precision and swallowed without chewing. "They're twins, raised them from cubs after their mother was killed by poachers. Incredibly smart. Watch this. Bonnie, Clyde, dance." The wolves stood on their hind legs and spun in a circle. Kalneth's translator made a small dying sound. "Shake," Zoya commanded. Each wolf lifted a paw. "Play dead." They flopped over, tongues lolling, looking absolutely ridiculous and still somehow deadly. "So, as you can see," Zoya said, gesturing at the menagerie of apex predators currently occupying her quarters like this was completely normal, "they're very well trained, excellent temperaments, no behavioral issues whatsoever." Kalneth looked at the tiger, who was now rolling on her back with her paws in the air. He looked at the bear, who had apparently decided that Brant made an excellent pillow and was gently pinning the boy down with one massive paw. He looked at the wolves, who were now play-fighting with each other, all teeth and snarls that were apparently affectionate. "I need," Kalneth said, "to call an emergency council session." "Is that really necessary?" Zoya asked. "They're confined to quarters. They won't bother anyone." From the doorway, Lumen drifted in, having apparently bypassed the remaining security entirely. Their bioluminescent form pulsed with absolute delight. "Oh, they're magnificent!" Lumen exclaimed. "Look at the muscle structure, the sensory adaptations. Are those retractable claws? They are! Fascinating! Hello, beautiful creatures!" Duchess, because apparently the universe had decided that nothing made sense anymore, rolled over and padded toward Lumen, making that chuffing sound again. "Can I pet her?" Lumen asked. "Sure," Zoya said. "Just let her smell you first. She's very polite." Kalneth watched, mandibles hanging open, as Lumen extended a tendril and Duchess sniffed it delicately before butting her head against the jellyfish alien in a gesture of apparent friendship. "This is," Kalneth tried again. "This is absolutely against regulations?" Zoya suggested. "See, that's where it gets interesting. I've been reading station law very carefully. Very, very carefully. And nowhere in the regulations does it actually prohibit domesticated companion animals. It prohibits uncontrolled predatory species. Mine are controlled. It prohibits animals that pose a danger to station inhabitants. Mine are trained to only be dangerous on command. It prohibits species that cannot coexist peacefully in a multi-species environment." She gestured at Duchess, who was now purring while Lumen examined her stripes. "I'd say we're coexisting pretty peacefully." "The regulations," Kalneth said desperately, pulling up his data pads with shaking hands, "clearly state that, here, Section 8, Subsection 12, animals capable of causing significant bodily harm." Capable of and likely to are very different things, Zoya countered. I'm capable of causing significant bodily harm. You don't see anyone banning humans from the station. We have considered it, Kalneth muttered, but he was already scrolling through the regulations, and the horrible truth was dawning on him. She was right. The wording was vague enough that technically, if the animals were trained and controlled, if they responded to commands, if they showed no aggressive behavior toward station inhabitants, then they fell into a legal gray area, a very large, very toothy legal gray area. I still need to convene the council, Kalneth said. This is beyond my authority to approve. Fair enough, Zoya agreed. Should I bring the kids? Absolutely not. Probably wise, she conceded. They can be a bit overwhelming in group settings. Overwhelming, Kalneth thought, watching Colonel yawn again and reveal a mouthful of teeth designed to crack bones, was possibly the understatement of the cycle. An hour later, the emergency council session was in full chaos. Representatives from 18 different species crowded into the council chamber, all talking over each other, all with opinions about the humans and their predators. Kalneth presented his case. These were dangerous animals from a death world, apex predators, creatures whose evolutionary purpose was to kill. They had no place on a diplomatic station. Zoya, allowed to present her defense, pulled up her documentation. Vaccination records, behavioral assessments conducted by 3 different xenobiologists, video footage of Brant sleeping curled up with Duchess, footage of Colonel gently taking a piece of fruit from Zoya's hand, footage of the wolves performing complex tricks and commands. These animals, she said calmly, have been part of my family for years. They were rescued from situations where they would have died. I rehabilitated them, trained them, gave them a life. They're not weapons, they're not threats, they're family. They're predators, someone shouted from the back. So are half the species in this room, Zoya shot back. The Ventaxians are obligate carnivores. The Quellan have venom sacs. The Thuvians have retractable bone blades in their forearms. We're all predators here. The difference is social conditioning and choice. The chamber erupted in argument again. A vote was called. It was going to be close. Kalneth could see it in the way representatives were clustering, debating, checking their own species regulations about animal companions. Then the alarms started blaring. Emergency klaxons, the kind that meant genuine danger, not a drill. The kind that made everyone in the chamber freeze, argument forgotten. Security breach, a voice announced over the station-wide system. Lower decks. All personnel evacuate to safe zones. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill. Kalneth's remaining security team immediately moved into position, but he was already pulling up security feeds on his data pads, and what he saw made his blood run cold. Raiders. Nethril raiders, specifically. Heavily armed, moving through the lower decks toward the civilian sectors. His security forces were falling back, outgunned and outmaneuvered. The raiders were professionals, and they were heading straight for the hospitality sector, where hundreds of civilians were currently going about their day, completely unaware of the danger, where Lumen's people worked and lived. Kalneth looked at his screens, at his overwhelmed security forces, at the raiders who were moving with military precision through his station. Then he looked at Zoya. She was already moving, speaking rapidly into her personal comm. Brant, seal the door after I leave. Don't open it for anyone but me. Understand? Her son's voice came back, calm as ever. Understood. Be careful. Always am, she lied. She turned to Kalneth. I'm going to make this very simple for you. You wanted to know if my animals are dangerous? They're extremely dangerous. The question isn't if they're dangerous. The question is dangerous to who? And before Kalneth could stop her, Before he could cite any regulations at all, Zoya was running toward her quarters, and every instinct he possessed said that whatever was about to happen, the galaxy's definition of dangerous, was about to get a very violent education. Zoya made it back to her quarters in under 3 minutes, which was impressive considering she had to navigate panicking civilians and emergency bulkheads starting to close. The door slid open at her approach, and Brant was waiting, already holding the harnesses and communication collars. "How bad?" he asked. "Bad enough," Zoya said, taking the equipment and moving toward the animals. Duchess was already on her feet, sensing the tension. Colonel had risen from his lounging position, ears forward, alert. The wolves were pacing, picking up on the energy in the room. Raiders, armed, moving toward the hospitality sector. She fastened the collar around Duchess's neck, checking the tracking device and vital monitors. Multiple hostages likely. Security is overwhelmed. "So we're doing this. We're doing this." She looked at her son. This 12-year-old who'd grown up around apex predators and somehow turned out remarkably well-adjusted. "You stay here, door sealed. If anyone tries to get in, who isn't me or station security—" "I know the drill, Mom." She hugged him quickly, fiercely, then turned to her animals. They were watching her with that particular intensity that said they understood something was happening, something that required their attention. "Listen up, babies," she said, her voice taking on the tone she used for serious training. "We've got bad people on the station. They're hurting innocents. We're going to stop them, but we're doing it my way. That means controlled aggression. Intimidate, contain, restrain. No killing unless I give the word. Understand?" Duchess chuffed and lowered herself into a stalking position. Colonel huffed and swung his massive head toward the door. Bonnie and Clyde moved to flank her, eyes bright, ears forward. "Good," Zoya said. She activated her comm, patching into the security frequency. "Call Neth, this is Zoya. I'm releasing my animals. Tell your people to stay. Clear of sectors 9 through 15. My kids are going hunting." There was a pause, then Kalneth's voice, strained. "This is highly irregular. You want irregular or you want dead civilians? Your call." Another pause, longer. Then, "Sectors 9 through 15, all personnel pull back. Make a corridor. Unknown assets inbound." Unknown assets. She almost laughed. That was one way to put it. Zoya opened the door, and they moved. Duchess led the way, her body low, moving through the corridors like liquid death. 300 pounds of predator designed by millions of years of evolution to hunt, to track, to kill, now focused entirely on the task Zoya had given her. Her paws made almost no sound on the metal deck plating. Colonel followed, his massive bulk somehow quiet despite his size. Bears weren't ambush predators like tigers, but they were intelligent, adaptable, and absolutely relentless when they needed to be. The wolves flanked them, moving in perfect coordination, checking corners, watching their backs. Pack instincts, honed over countless training sessions, now applied to real combat. And Zoya ran with them, keeping pace, her hand on her datapad tracking their vitals and positions, trusting years of work and bonding to keep them focused. They hit Sector 12, and she could hear the raiders now. Shouting in Nethril, the harsh, clicking language aggressive and cruel. Weapons fire, someone screaming. Zoya touched her comm. "Brant, I need eyes. Patch me into security feeds." "On it." Her son's fingers flew over his interface. "Sending to your pad now. Looks like 8 raiders, maybe 9. Hostages in the central marketplace. Raiders are using them as shields. Positions? 3 at the north entrance, 2 south, 3 with the hostages. 1 more, looks like the leader, moving between positions." "Perfect." Zoya knelt down, bringing her face level with Duchess. "Girl, I need you to make an entrance. North side. Big. Loud. Make them look at you." The tiger's eyes gleamed. "Colonel, you're with me. South entrance. When they turn toward Duchess, we come in behind. Bonnie, Clyde, you're on cleanup. Anyone tries to run, you stop them. No biting unless they shoot first." The wolves' tails swished once. Acknowledgement. 30 seconds, Zoya said. "Mark." Duchess vanished down a side corridor, her orange and black stripes disappearing into shadow like she'd never been there at all. The wolves split off, moving to flanking positions. Zoya and Colonel positioned themselves at the south entrance, and she could feel her heart hammering, but her hands were steady. This was what they trained for. This was why she'd spent years teaching them control, discipline, the difference between threat and execution. 20 seconds. She pulled up the security feed, watching the raiders. They were professionals, she'd give them that. Good formation, watching angles, keeping their hostages close. But they were looking for station security, for armed response, for conventional tactics. They weren't looking for Earth. 10 seconds. Duchess would be in position now, coiled, waiting. 5 seconds. Zoya took a breath, keyed her calm. Now. The roar that echoed through the marketplace wasn't just sound. It was primal fear given voice, the kind of sound that bypassed rational thought and went straight to the ancient parts of the brain that remembered when humans were prey, when darkness meant death, when that sound meant run or die. Duchess exploded into the marketplace from the north entrance, and 3 trained raiders, professionals who'd seen combat across a dozen systems, absolutely lost their minds. The tiger moved like nothing they'd ever seen, like violence given form and purpose. She covered the distance in bounds that seemed to defy physics, and when she roared again, even the hostages felt it in their bones. The 3 raiders at the north entrance opened fire. Stun rounds, projectiles, energy weapons. Duchess was already moving, weaving between shots with predatory grace, and then she was on them. Not killing. Zoya had said no killing, but a 300-pound tiger hitting you at full speed was enough to break bones even without the teeth and claws. The first raider went down under her weight, screaming. The second tried to run. Duchess caught him by the leg and dragged him back, ignoring his struggles like he weighed nothing. The third raider was smarter. He aimed for the civilians, trying to use them as leverage. Colonel came through the south entrance like a landslide. The grizzly didn't roar, didn't need to. His presence was announcement enough. 600 pounds of muscle and fury, rising up on hind legs to his full 3-meter height, and the raiders at the south entrance forgot all their training. One dropped his weapon and ran. Bonnie and Clyde were waiting, cutting off his escape, herding him back toward the center where he collapsed, curled up, making sounds that no hardened raider should make. The other South Raider made the mistake of shooting at Colonel. The stun round hit the bear's chest and did absolutely nothing except make him angry. Colonel dropped to all fours and charged, and the raider had just enough time to realize his mistake before 600 pounds of bear tackled him into a support pillar hard enough to dent the metal. The 3 raiders with the hostages were now surrounded, their backup neutralized, watching apex predators from a death world circle them with cold intelligence. The leader, a scarred Nethril with cybernetic enhancements, grabbed a civilian, pressed a blade to their throat. "Call them off or I start cutting!" Zoya walked into the marketplace, calm as could be, and every predator immediately oriented on her. Pack leader, Alpha, the one they listened to. "Here's what's going to happen," she said conversationally. "You're going to put down the knife. You're going to release the hostages. You're going to lie down on the ground with your hands behind your head. And if you do all that, I'll call off my animals, and you get to leave this station alive." "Or what?" the leader snarled. "Your pets attack, and I kill the hostage? Or, Zoya said, I give the word, and you learn exactly why humans are the only species that domesticated wolves. The only species that made friends with animals that could kill us. You want to know why? She didn't wait for an answer. Because we're scarier than they are. She made a gesture, small, precise. A command the animals knew well. Duchess moved first, so fast the eye could barely track it. She didn't go for the leader. She went for his hand, jaws closing around the wrist, holding the knife with controlled pressure. Not breaking, not yet. Just holding, making it very clear that she could bite through bone if she wanted. The knife clattered to the ground. Colonel positioned himself between the raiders and any possible exit, a living wall of fur and threat. The wolves circled the remaining two raiders, driving them together, teeth bared, showing exactly what would happen if they tried anything. Down, Zoya said quietly. On the ground. Now. They went down. Every single one of them. And that's when Kalneth and his security team arrived, weapons ready, to find the situation completely under control. 8 raiders subdued and terrified, hostages unharmed and staring in shock, and 4 Earth predators sitting calmly around Zoya like the world's most dangerous honor guard. So, Zoya said, turning to Kalneth with a slight smile, about that council vote? The council chamber reconvened 3 hours later, but the atmosphere had changed completely. Word had spread through the station faster than a containment breach. Video footage, shaky and amateur, showed Duchess taking down armed raiders. Someone had captured Colonel's charge on their personal device. The images of Bonnie and Clyde herding the criminals like wayward livestock had already become what humans called memes. Kalneth stood at his position, mandibles clicking slowly as he reviewed the incident reports. 8 raiders in custody, 0 casualties among civilians or security personnel. The hostages were shaken, but physically unharmed. His own security team had performed adequately, but everyone knew, absolutely knew, who had actually resolved the situation. The council members filed in, but the hostile energy from before was gone. Now they looked at Zoya with something different. Curiosity, respect, in some cases, awe. Lumen drifted in last, their bioluminescent form pulsing with barely contained excitement. They'd spent the last 2 hours in the medical bay, not treating injuries, but interviewing witnesses, collecting data, absolutely fascinated by what they'd witnessed. The council will come to order, announced the chair being, a 4-armed Quellan who'd been doing this job for longer than Kalneth had been alive. We are here to discuss the matter of, unconventional assets employed during the security breach. Let's call them what they are, someone said from the back. Weapons. The human brought weapons to our station. Interesting perspective, Zoya said calmly. She was standing in the center of the chamber, relaxed, confident. Because my understanding is that weapons are inanimate objects. Tools. My animals are living, thinking beings who made choices. They chose to protect people who were in danger. They're predators from a death world, another voice argued, though it lacked the venom from earlier. They're inherently dangerous. So are half the species in this room, Zoya repeated her earlier point. Including humans. We're all dangerous if we choose to be. The question isn't capability. It's intent, training, and control. Kalneth found himself speaking before he'd entirely decided to. The footage shows remarkable discipline. The tiger, Duchess, had multiple opportunities to employ lethal force. She did not. The bear, Colonel, could have crushed the raider he tackled. He did not. The wolves could have torn out throats. They did not. He paused, mandibles clicking thoughtfully. That level of restraint, from predators in a combat situation, is extraordinary. It's years of training, Zoya said. These animals were babies when I found them. Orphaned, injured, facing certain death. I gave them a chance, and they gave me their trust. That bond isn't about dominance. It's about mutual respect, communication, and love. Love? Someone made a derisive sound. You can't love a predator. Sure you can, Zoya said simply. Humans have been doing it for thousands of years. We domesticated wolves into dogs. We befriended cats, horses, birds of prey. We swam with creatures that could drown us, walked with animals that could trample us, and we survived not by being the strongest, but by being the smartest. By understanding that partnership is more valuable than domination. The chamber was quiet. Not the hostile silence from before, but a thoughtful one. Lumen spoke up, their voice chiming softly. I have reviewed the security footage extensively. I have also reviewed the behavioral data that Zoya provided. What I see is a bond between species that most of us cannot fully comprehend. These animals respond to her commands with a precision that rivals artificial intelligence. They assess threats with judgment that matches trained security personnel, and they show emotional attachment that is, frankly, beautiful. They also scared 8 hardened raiders into complete submission, Kalneth added dryly, which my security forces were failing to do. The question before us, the chair being said, is whether these animals constitute a danger to station inhabitants. We have seen evidence that they are capable of significant violence. We have also seen evidence that this violence can be controlled, directed, and restrained. The Council must decide if the potential benefit outweighs the potential risk. I have a proposal, Lumen said. Create a new classification. Dangerous animals under expert human management. Require documentation, regular behavioral assessments, and strict protocols, but allow them to remain, with conditions. Murmurs ran through the chamber. Not agreement, not yet, but consideration. The precedent this sets, someone began. The precedent has already been set, Kalneth interrupted. Humans are integrating into galactic society. They bring their customs, their cultures, and yes, their companion animals. We can either acknowledge this reality and create reasonable frameworks, or we can fight a losing battle against the inevitable. I have seen what happens when we try to impose our understanding of danger onto a species that evolved on a world where danger is simply called nature. He looked at Zoya, and his mandibles clicked in what she'd learned to recognize as approval. They saved lives today. That is not hypothetical. That is documented fact. The vote, when it came, was not unanimous. But it didn't need to be. The majority agreed to Lumen's proposal. Zoya's animals could stay, under strict conditions and regular oversight. The new classification would be added to station law, opening the door for other humans with their unusual companions. After the session ended, Kalneth found Zoya in the corridor. She was on her comm, talking to Brant, assuring him everything was fine. That went better than I expected, Kalneth admitted. Did it? Zoya smiled. I was pretty confident once Colonel sat on that raider. Your confidence is terrifying. Thank you. They walked in companionable silence for a moment, heading back toward the residential sectors. Then Kalneth said, The documentation you provided mentioned these 4 animals specifically. Duchess, Colonel, Bonnie, and Clyde. That's right. It did not mention any other animals. Nope. Kalneth stopped walking. Zoya. She kept walking, not looking at him. Yes, Kalneth? Do you have other animals? Define other. Any quantity of animals beyond the 4 currently in your quarters. Zoya paused at an intersection, considering. Well, I couldn't just leave the crocodile. She's been with me for 5 years, and she gets anxious when I travel. And the python needed a new habitat, because his old one was being shut down. Oh, and there's this absolutely wonderful mountain lion, her name is—" Kalneth made a sound that his species made when experiencing severe distress, a sort of whistling keen that echoed down the corridor. "They're all in long-term holding on my transport ship," Zoya continued cheerfully. "Very secure, temperature-controlled. I wasn't going to mention them unless the council vote went well." "How many?" Kalneth managed. "How many total? Including the ones in my quarters?" "Yes. 11. But that's counting the 2 baby raccoons as separate, and honestly, they're so small they barely count." Kalneth